What's going on, people? Georgio Savvides here, founder of the Hip Hop Orchestra, as well as the host of the Hip Hop Orchestra Presents podcast. And I got a really exciting announcement to finally make with everyone, is that we have our very first official sponsor for the podcast. Now, they are an amazing company called Odin's Vote, who are extremely dedicated in bringing you the very best in officially licensed merchandise from pop culture. And when I mean the very best, I mean the very best. They provide things like keyrings, caps, t-shirts, to Funko Pops, to statues from all over, such as DC, Marvel, Disney, The Mandalorian, Harry Potter, music artists from all over the place, and they are ridiculously good. I've got a couple of things to show you on offer at the moment. This trust with their stuff is amazing. So, t-shirts, like I mentioned, like the one I'm wearing right now. It's got Rocky right here, which I absolutely love. Or, like I said, also got Funko Pops as well, 3.75 inches and 10 inches. I've got a couple of 10 inches right here for you. I've got Post Malone right here, and I've also got Biggie right here, who I absolutely love. These are so sick. Odin's Vote, trust me, they are amazing. Now, I'm going to leave the link below in the video right here, and also in the description below as well in all future videos from the podcast. But trust me, Odin's Vote are amazing. Website is www.odinsvote.co.uk. Get in touch with them now and start buying ASAP. But also, before I forget as well, I just want to say the biggest thank you to Odin's Vote for sponsoring the podcast. It means the absolute world to me. Thank you. And trust me, get in touch with them right now. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And peace. What's going on, people? Welcome to another amazing episode, and I'm joined by someone who I've looked up to for so many years. I'm actually quite nervous about today's actually one of the busiest, most sought after composers of the 21st century, who I've admired for so many years, Mr. Gabriel Prokofiev. How are you, sir? You okay?
I'm fine, thanks. Really good to be here, Georgio. Thanks so much for inviting me onto your podcast.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to finally meet you after so long as well. How have
Yeah,
things
exactly. Yeah.
how have things been? You been okay?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate, really, for the whole of the lockdown period. I've had a lot of work on, but I mean, life isn't the same. I think everyone's up and down, you could say. And it's weird actually. At first, I thought, well, this won't be an issue. I just keep composing in my studio, no change to my life. But actually, being aware that the whole world is on standstill, it does affect your inspiration. There's this kind of lack of creative energy out there almost. It's quite tough, but I've had some really good moments in the last year of a lot of new music that I've written. So generally I'm feeling pretty positive at the moment. Just got to keep fighting, keep going, and hopefully soon life will return to normal and everyone will go a bit wild, where there'll be this like rebound, and a kind of really exciting time for music. I'm hoping, we just got to hang on.
Definitely, for sure. I couldn't agree more, because I know that there's similar sort of thing happened years ago. I think after the Spanish flu, when the Great Gatsby happened. So that, like you said, like a great explosion of art just came out. And so like you said, when things do go back to normal, hopefully very soon, that whole explosion of music and art will just come through again.
Yeah, they're saying like it's going to be the roaring 20s 100 years later. And it is the 20s again by coincidence. It's quite weird.
Like, it is really weird.
Yeah.
But I did want to get into actually about your kind of inspiration, because you said obviously it's affected your inspiration. How have you been working throughout this whole situation? Has it been okay, or do you find it a lot more difficult to work through now?
No, I mean, my general way of working is that I always have quite a few projects on the boil, and so I have deadlines, and then I'm passionate about each project, and so I just kind of see each project through and just work through it. And even for every artist, you work on something. There's moments when you're really inspired, you really get into it. Then often I find not that far from finishing it, sometimes I hit a bit of a slow patch, and you just have to you work through it. It's my passion, music composing, but also it becomes a job as well. And I think a lot of artists know to make a finished piece of work is often quite, there's always a challenge there. So I was very lucky actually. In the middle of last year, around about April, I got a job to do the soundtrack for a sci-fi series, and I've never done TV before. I've done quite a bit of film, and this was actually very cinematic. And it's actually made by a really interesting new Indian production company called Memesis Productions. So it's set in Goa, and they're really trying to break away from the stereotypes of Bollywood and Hindi cinema. And so it feels very modern. Feels like, it belongs on Netflix. It's actually going to be broadcast on Hotstar Disney, which is the Indian equivalent to Netflix. And I was really lucky to do that because that was 3 months of really intense work, and I could just completely immerse myself in it. And the deadlines are so tight when you do something like that. They send you a draft episode, and they're waiting for like full 45 minutes of music back within 2 weeks.
Wow.
Your head is down, and they wanted orchestral, electronic. It was quite an ambitious project. They liked what I was doing already. They'd found me on Apple Music. So I didn't have to compromise my sound too much. Obviously, sometimes you have to kind of you are working to picture. You're working and you're trying to get the mood that fits what they have envisioned. But that really helped, just having something so intense to work on. Because prior to that, I was working on a new viola concerto, which I'm still working on now. And I found that quite hard to get into at first because that was completely down to me. There was no sort of outside influence. And yeah, not going to gigs, not touring, not being out in the real world, it sort of that dampened my, I don't know, the sort of connection with the world in a way. So I feel I was very lucky with that. But then actually the viola concerto came together. I started getting progress with that. And then what else have then I've been doing some other kind of electronic stuff, started mixing an album that I'd recorded earlier in the year. So just have to keep, it's the same challenge we normally face, just amplified.
Do you prefer having many projects on the go, or do you prefer having, say, one just to focus on, say, for instance, a sci-fi that you're working on?
Well, it's nice when you can just get completely lost in one project and there's nothing else going on. I think that's a really nice scenario when you're just deep into one project. You don't have any disturbances. But on the other hand, sometimes when I'm doing a big project and there's a point when maybe you need a break, then it's great if you've got another project that you can then work on. So you stay productive, but you kind of clear your mind and your perspective of the bigger project. And then when you come back, your ears are fresh. So sometimes I might sort of juggle 2 projects back to back. So do a few days or a week or 2 on one, and then do a week on the other one, so you get this just, there's a real danger when you're working by yourself in a studio that you can overwork things and you can get stuck on stuff. And so it's very important to just try and keep that fresh perspective and not get too bogged down on something.
Of course. I mean, how often do you take breaks during your day? Because like you mentioned, you've got 45 minutes worth of work, say, for instance, in a couple of weeks. I mean, do you take every a couple of hours or every hour, or just take like a few minute breaks to freshen your ears? How does it work for you?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny, with that sci-fi series, because I had so much to do. I knew it was going to be one of those situations when I was just working really long days. So often I was doing with that one, it was most days was like 11, 12, 13 hour days. It was really long and intense, and sometimes even longer. And I mean, a few years ago, I promised myself I'd always take a 1 hour lunch break, because I know there's one thing in the UK where the diet is actually pretty similar to the French diet, but UK has a much higher level of heart disease. And a lot of that's to do with us not giving time to eat and digest our food. And so I thought, okay, I want to be healthy. I want to, and I want to, it actually helps break up the day. So I always look forward to like a nice, decent 1 hour lunch break every day. Other than that, I'm pretty much working straight through. Occasional cup of tea or something, or quickly check. I mean, that's the awful thing about modern life. The break from your work is sometimes just checking emails. So you're still working, but you're resting your ears.
Oh, but I'm wishing you all the very best of luck with that. When's it due for release?
So that they keep the series is called OK Computer, and
Hmm.
it's all about AI. It's really, yeah, very very lovely project, really cleverly done, and it's like a really, yeah. I think people who like sci-fi are going to love this because it's a really different approach to sci-fi. It was meant to come out already actually in November, but I think it's going to be March or April. So
Okay.
I'll announce it on my website, and yeah, there'll certainly be quite a bit of talk about it when it comes out. And Hotstar, you can get it in the UK. I don't know if they're going to put it on the Disney Channel as well. I'm hoping that will happen, but we'll see.
I wish you all the very best of luck with that. It sounds amazing.
Cheers.
And I know that you obviously released a brand new single recently, Six Heads at Heights,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
is amazing. I mean, when you sent me the package as well of the whole process and the whole concept, it was sounded amazing. I mean, how was that for you to work on?
Thanks. Yeah. Well, that was interesting actually, and that I would say that piece is very much a came out of the lockdown scenario. In that, so I was working. Trying to think what point it was. It might be when I was working on the viola concerto, or even I might have already been on the series. And there was just a few days when I was just feeling a little bit creatively lost, and I just stumbled across this sketch of that piece that I'd done for a piece I did a year ago, a ballet called Sense of Time for Birmingham Royal Ballet, and it was orchestral but with a really subby deep kick drum, like a kind of a kind of hip hop beat, and then some synths in it as well. So and I listened to it and I was like, oh god, yeah, I've completely forgotten about this. I haven't used it, and I just kind of got excited. It kind of woke me up a bit, gave me a kick. I love music with a really good groove or good syncopated rhythm. I think that's the big thing we have in common, and that's what I think what you're doing is so exciting. And I love orchestral music, of course, and that piece was kind of going to go nowhere, and so I just thought, hang on, why don't I just, I'm enjoying this. Why don't I just finish it and release it as a single? Just do something immediate, because we're not doing gigs at the moment. We've lost most of musicians and composers. We've lost that immediate interaction with audiences. So one of the solutions is just to try and release music, just get stuff out there, just finish things, do it fast, just so you've had that sense of communication and that satisfaction of getting stuff out there rather than just this period of silence. So yeah, I just thought, okay, I'm just going to finish this, and did it pretty quickly. And then Non-Classical, the label that I'm part of, well, I founded, but now I've taken a step back. I'm artistic director, but I'm not in charge of it anymore. And they were really keen to release it. So yeah,
Mm.
it happened quite fast.
But it's fantastic. Obviously, I listened to it when we sent it to me. It's amazing. So really well done. I mean, how difficult was it for you to work on, obviously, during this whole lockdown? Because obviously it is impossible to obviously film orchestras and so forth in this
Yeah.
time. I mean, which is something you mentioned, obviously. I mean, how difficult was it to kind of rearrange things and work on to get it out
So
there in
what?
time?
Yeah. So what happened with that track is, so yeah, it was composed for orchestra and electronics, and but I was just felt excited by the track, and I thought I want to get this out now. There's a thing about creating a piece of music and wanting it out immediately. And actually, in the classical world, often you compose a piece, and sometimes it's months until it gets performed, and then it's years until it actually gets recorded and released. Like I've released 2 albums over the last 2 years of my concertos, of my bass drum concerto, concerto for turntables, cello concerto, and saxophone concerto, and all of those pieces were a few years old. I would have loved to have released them as soon as I wrote them, but it
Mm.
takes a long time to coordinate orchestral recording, etc. And so with that piece I thought, no, I want it out now, but no way I'm going to get an orchestra. And because of the sci-fi series I'd done, in that I'd had to use orchestral libraries, so it's not real orchestras, it's just big sample banks of real orchestras when they played every single note in a scale in all different styles and different dynamics. And so I've been working with these orchestral libraries for several months. So I was in a really good zone with them, and I thought I could get them to sound really realistic. So I just said, okay, I'm not going to, sadly, though obviously I'd love to record it with a real orchestra, I'm just going to use the library, and I'm just going to really make sure that it sounds as real and as organic as I can. So I just spent a long time really adjusting the sounds. And then obviously there's electronics in there, so I made sure they sounded great, So it was just, yeah, it's sort of it's a compromise, but ultimately, if the music musical idea comes across how you want it to come across, you know, you've got to go with it. I mean, I just hope I can get the piece performed live when lockdown is over.
Oh, for sure. 'Cause it sounded fantastic, like we said. And what sound libraries do you tend to use when you actually compose from home if you can't have access to orchestras? Do you use Spitfire or Hollywood
Yes.
Strings or?
I use both.
Yeah.
The two you mentioned are the two that I use. It's really funny. I started off. I mean, I have actually used orchestral libraries for years, because even when I'm writing, when I've got a piece that's going to be for a real orchestra, I still like to make a demo, because I like to actually listen to it as if I'm the audience, listen to it in a really critical way. If you just look at the score, you're still very much, I think you're still looking at it from the composer's perspective. If I can listen to my music played even by a sample orchestra, it gives me like an objectivity, and you can step back and be really critical, kind of imagine, oh, what if I heard this on the radio?
Hmm.
Would I be like, oh wow, what is this? I really need to find out. I often say, oh, if I hear it, I try to think, would I be jealous if I heard this on the radio? Would I be like, oh, who's the bastard who wrote this? It's amazing. So if I can get myself in that state, you know, that kind of objective state of mind. So I started off using the Vienna library, but that's like, it's got to be like 15 years ago or something. That was just with Logic, on the Logic sampler EXS24. And then 3 or 4 years ago, I bought the Hollywood like complete library, because that was very good value, and it actually is pretty nice. I'm not crazy about the interface, but it works well, and you've got in lots of different dynamics and styles of instruments. But then I just got into the Spitfire libraries during the beginning of lockdown. I bought the London Contemporary Orchestra, their library. And what was funny about that is I know those guys, and they actually commissioned my bass drum concerto like 7 or 8 years ago. And I know the players. I was like, wow, I'm using people I actually work with.
Yeah.
And I really like that. And that library, they do a lot of extended techniques. So they do a lot of sounds you don't get on a normal orchestral library. They do like extreme ponticello. They do like this woozy vibrato, like a whoa, 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 like a really nice detuned sound. Yeah, so that was just that really inspired me actually using that library, because I know the musicians, and also the Spitfire solo strings. Again, Thomas Gould is a violinist, a good friend of mine, so I've been using him as a sample library. So it's very funny doing that, and that was great.
I mean, that's amazing. Have you had a chance to be part of the makings of these libraries as well at any point? Because you said you work with them, obviously, with your work. Have you had a chance to actually see the making of these libraries by chance?
I'd love to do that. I'm curious. I mean, I know Joby Burgess, the percussionist, so he's a good friend, and he did a big percussion library for them. So I remember when he was doing it, and he was sort of telling me about all the mics they had set up and the studio, but I never actually made it down to see it, unfortunately. I mean, I could say, you know, I make my own sample libraries in terms of creating interesting percussion sounds, or, you know, using electronics. Like I've got a whole bunch of old synths I use. Particularly, I've got the ARP Odyssey, which is like from 1973 or 74, and I often spend a few hours just getting some really interesting sounds and sonics out of that, and then I edit that into a sampler instrument so I can play it really rhythmically. And I've used that actually in quite a lot of compositions, because it's, on one hand, you know, you can play it just the synth by itself, but when you actually chop it up, you can turn it into a really interesting percussive and much more complex instrument, you know, when you use it in samples.
Obviously, I can see behind you the amazing collection that you do have of different synths and so forth. Do you have a personal favorite or favorites that you do go to for your, like,
yeah,
really sort of like that you work from?
Yeah, I mean, with the synths, for me, I mean, the ARP Odyssey is my favorite. It's just got such a distinctive sound, and it's got this really, the oscillators got a really nice kind of edge to them. It's got this bite to it. You know, it turns out when I looked into it a bit more, it's a lot of artists I really like. They used in the 70s, like a lot of the jazz and funk people, whether it's like Herbie Hancock or Brian Eno, Kraftwerk as well. They all use. There's one called the ARP 2600, which is this big much bigger thing that you can't, very expensive, very hard to get these days. But the ARP Odyssey is actually the same components as that, but just kind of packed into a single synth. And I think probably that's one of the reasons I like the sound of it, because there are artists I respect who use it. But then once I started using it, I found it was just really good for generating quite complex sounds, actually, really interesting sounds. I mean, I do have, I've got a DX11. That used to be a keyboard I really liked. And got a Jupiter 4. I used to use that. I used to use that more in the past when I played in a band. That's good set for kind of, band stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about Jupiter as well, and maybe Andromeda A6 as well. I think. I mean, is there any that you would like to add to your collection, such as like a Jupiter J8? I think it is, or
what was that? Sorry,
that's okay. And is there any sort of synth that you would love to add to your collection that you've played with in the past or seen?
Yeah, I mean I need to. What's my a friend of mine just got the Moog or the Moog 1, which is that huge poly Moog, which does sound pretty major. I do like the Prophet 5. I use the plugin for Prophet 5 a lot, and I would love to have an original Prophet. I mean, that's a really, really important synthesizer. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, the CS80, again, that's a plugin I use a lot. Yamaha CS80. That's what Vangelis used.
Yeah,
pretty much. That was the main synth he used for the whole of the Blade Runner soundtrack, for example. And I remember I nearly bought one years ago. I think actually that was the CS, not the 80, might be in the 60 or the 70. And on eBay, years back, and it was quite cheap. And that was before they'd released the plugin, before they'd been like a kind of re-interest. But that apparently weighs about 40 kilos or something.
Really?
So, and some of those old ones aren't that reliable as well. That's the other problem. But
I can imagine.
Yeah.
But earlier you mentioned about sort of when you work on a track, something it can take months or even years to record orchestral musicians and so forth. When that does happen, do you tend to make many changes to the tracks? If you get maybe not bored, but okay, I've got a better idea for that one now, or do you keep making tweaks to the song before you actually start recording?
Yeah, so I mean, generally, like with my orchestral music, the process of creating the score is quite a lot of work, and my main orchestral pieces are these concertos mainly, and they're all like between 20 and 30 minutes long, and by the time I've done the first performance, a lot of work has gone in to finish the score. And sometimes, after the first performance, second performance, I'll be making some notes after, and I'll go, that bit, I just think, I could improve it slightly, little tweaks, like, maybe the orchestration could be a bit bigger, or I could take some instruments out. And sometimes even in the rehearsals, I can make some very quick changes. But then, generally when the piece is first being performed, I might make some changes. And actually with my cello concerto, when I realized I was going to get that recorded, I reworked some of the orchestration, because in the original premiere of it, I learned a big lesson about the cello, which is the cello to me is a loud, powerful instrument, and I'd written a piece for solo cello, and it's got really nice, it can have a really nice gritty sound. It can also be very lyrical, but then you put it in front of an orchestra and it just disappears. I'm not joking. When I did my cello concerto, I freaked out. It was they were playing this concerto, the first movement, and I was looking at the stage and I was going, but why isn't the cellist playing? And then I looked a bit closer and I was like, he is playing. Then I thought, well, why can't I hear him? And it was because basically the register of the cello, when they're sitting in front of the other string instruments, just kind of disappears acoustically into the rest of the strings. And so then in the premiere, they had to just play very quietly, the orchestra, which obviously you don't want an orchestra playing quietly for 25 minutes. They need to play really loud and feel excited. They need to enjoy the piece and let loose. So then after the premiere, before the recording, I changed the orchestration quite a bit, and I think I really improved the piece quite a lot. So sometimes, you have a really significant issue like that. With the bass drum concerto, the original first movement got taken out of the piece completely, and that's like a separate piece now. And then I did a few structural changes. So I think it's a good, the recording is such a big moment for a piece that often it's definitely worth looking at the piece and saying, well, can I make this better? But I'm always busy with other projects, so I don't have time to like continuously rework stuff. And
Mm.
obviously, it's dangerous if you keep going back over your old pieces. You know,
Yeah,
it's a balancing act, really.
it really is. And is that maybe one of the reasons why you took a step back from non-classical as well to focus on these projects?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, the thing with non-classical is that was came out of necessity, really. And for me, it was I started the label and the club nights back in 2004, so it's a long
Mm.
time ago now. And it was because I was just really just getting going as a composer, and I just was so frustrated that there weren't that many outlets for classical composers, and especially for composers who wanted to connect with other young people and who felt their music had something to say beyond just the classical world, which is quite a kind of niche and quite a specific scene. You know, there are certain concert halls, and I thought actually there are a lot of people who go out clubbing who would love to hear classical music, but they're never going to get a chance.
Mm.
So that's why I started it. And before I knew it, I was like spending just most of my day actually running the nights and the label. And I remember first saying, you know, well, I'll just do a couple of hours email in the morning and then I'll go on my music. And then there'd be days when it's 5 p.m. and I'm still working on non-classical. And so I got a team involved. I got other people to help me out, and the organization grew. And then finally, around the time of like when non-classical were going about 10 years, I thought, okay, you know, there were situations when I was writing a violin concerto for the Proms, which was a big project for me back in 2014. And I remember like the rest of non-classical were waiting for me. The other people in the team were like, where's Gabriel? We need him to discuss this event we're putting on. And I was slowing down the organization. And then when they would come to me, it was annoying because I was trying to work on this piece. So, you know, I think there's for a certain amount of years in your life, you can like just do everything, you know, you just here, there and everywhere and you go for it. But there's a point when you think, this is just driving me crazy. My work's going to suffer. I've got to just focus, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, it's about trying to focus and not wear yourself out as well.
Of course, yeah, because your health is so important, isn't it? You can't.
Yeah, I bet you. I mean, I'm sure you have the same situation because there you are running this orchestra, you know, and amongst other things, and it's like just running an orchestra is a full-time job, you know. So it's like
Yeah,
very
it really is because I do love having several projects ongoing at the same time. That keeps me really motivated. I wake up excited every day. But there are some days we're thinking this is just taking forever. I mean, there's only so much you can do as a person until someone just keeps like longing things out, delaying things, and not getting back to you. And obviously, you know, with the emails and the calls. And one thing I do find really annoying is when people say call out to you to work with you, but then just ignore you.
yeah,
I get that all the time thinking you're the one that called me to work with you, but
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I learned to read people now as well. But sorry, I interrupted you there. Sorry.
No. I was just going to add to that that's the world we live in. It's very tricky because um, the way the communication methods we just bombard in the past. You know, people it was all just letters. You just receive a few letters a week. You'd kind of it was all. And if someone wanted to get in touch, wanted to work, they made the effort to put pen to paper. Now you can just knock out emails. People send stuff all the time. You just get too many. I miss emails all the time. So when you're saying, oh, people don't get back to you, it reminds me that often people just didn't see the email, you know, you mustn't take these things personally, you know. And I want to say to anybody who's waiting for an email from me, please don't take it personally. I've just been too busy or maybe I didn't see the email. Like every month or so, I come across an old email that I missed. I mean, I like 2 years, no, was it a year ago? I came across an email when this guy was inviting me to come and talk at a conference in Miami. And I didn't see the email and I missed
Wow.
it. I was
No.
it was like, and it was such a good opportunity. I was going to work with it was the chance to work with this amazing orchestra in Miami. Is it the New World Symphony?
I'm not sure, but it does sound really familiar
And,
though.
and I was like, wow, and missed it. But you know,
Oh
what can
man,
you
like
do? Yeah.
I was going to ask actually if there were many emails or opportunities that did come through that you accidentally did miss,
Yeah.
that being one of them. I mean, has there been many like that? over the
Yeah, no,
years?
sometimes on Facebook, sometimes people reach out on Facebook, on social media, because they don't have your email. And yeah, sometimes I see that too late. I mean, the Miami trip was that's probably the most painful one. I mean, yeah, there've been some like DJing opportunities or stuff when maybe I didn't see it, and but you just hope that people will understand that often messages get missed, and they just got to keep
Yeah,
sending. And
of
again, yeah, that's
course.
what everyone needs to do, unfortunately.
Of course, yeah. And I've learned over the years not to take anything personally because I know, like you said, everyone is busy and they don't always get to
Yeah.
see the messages. So I've learned. But you mentioned obviously the proms a minute ago, which is something I wanted to talk to you about. Actually, I mean, obviously your Concerto for Turntables is obviously one of the most viewed pieces of work of the 21st century. I mean, when you work with such an established company and event such as the proms, what's it like for you to actually work on it and have such amazing work previewed for everyone?
Yeah, well, that piece. Well, I don't know how, in terms of how many. What you mean? How many YouTube views it's had?
No, just that. It's just I know that everyone you talk to knows about it, and it's just one of those most. From
Yeah,
what I
no,
see,
that's
yeah,
true. No,
everyone
it,
knows about it.
it was a real breakthrough piece for me. That and yeah, and it has now, like in terms of one of the concertos written in the last 20 years, it's been performed like about 60 times worldwide, which is a lot for a
Wow.
contemporary piece. So I'm really happy with this, how that piece has kind of taken on a life of its own. And it was the proms performance of my concerto for turntables was a turning point in my career. I can't deny it, because it's having a piece that is going against the norms of classical music, being on that kind of platform of the proms was really something. And then they film it and record it in a really good quality, so it was available on YouTube for a lot of people to see. So that was a really big thing for me. Yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
yeah, definitely. And what was the process from beginning to end in terms of the whole idea to stage? Was it a really difficult thing to work on? It must have been a very difficult thing to work on.
So I mean, in terms of the concerto for turntable, so the story of that piece goes back earlier to like 2006, because the proms was 2011, so it's already 9 years ago. Well, not quite. Yeah, nine, nearly 10, 9.5. And yeah, what happened is that the piece was originally written for smaller orchestra, for chamber orchestra, and Will Dutter, who's a brilliant pianist and also an events producer, he was a student at the time of Trinity College of Music, and he had the idea of concerto for turntables. Actually, he approached me and said, "Would you write this concerto for turntables?" And then he got the new music ensemble, new music orchestra of Trinity College of Music to do the premiere, and then actually that was almost like a kind of like a preview version. Then we did the world premiere with the Heritage Orchestra, who
Mm,
also then recorded it
another
in
heritage, yeah.
2007. And they were really great to work with, and they totally got the idea behind the piece, which was, this is a classical concerto, but it's totally giving a nod to hip hop culture, not just through the turntables, but through some of the rhythms and the grooves that appear in the piece. Some of the music's completely classical, but some of it has got this awareness of hip hop culture and rhythms and sounds. And so they were really good to work with, because they got it, they totally understood it. Other orchestras who played the piece, it takes them a while to really get it, and they sometimes they don't quite get the feel, the rhythms, but they always, in the end, they always come round to it. And actually, when they see the turntablist and what they can do with the turntables, that really helps them understand what the piece is trying to achieve. And they get very excited. So classical musicians love to play with the turntables, because they think, wow, here's someone taking what we're playing and really bringing it into to contemporary culture, and they find that very exciting, and seeing how the turntables can manipulate the sound of an orchestra. And when it was done at the proms, I mean, I had to expand the orchestration, because that was the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain, which is a huge orchestra,
Hmm.
really good players. They're really young, but like they were absolutely excellent, and they wanted everything full size symphony orchestra. So I had to add harps, I had to expand the brass, the woodwind, everything, and that was really nice actually, because that was a few years after I'd written it. I'd got better at orchestration by then, and so I kind of expanded it. And but they got the piece again. It took them a little while to get into it, to loosen up, because they're all young classical musicians. They're really used to the traditional repertoire. And so they kind of first thought, this is weird, I can't like doing a groove in an orchestra, but
Yeah.
they got into it, you know. And I think increasingly there's more and more classical musicians who are musically more open-minded, and they're open to different genres, you know, and that's how music evolves, you know. You get this influence from emerging styles with the classical styles, and it's happened since the beginning. You know, classical music shouldn't ever try to shut itself off from other genres. There's always been this back and forth, and you've got it from back in the Baroque. They were using all the dance moves of the time, you know. It's just they've become classical to us because that's how we meet them now, you know. And the
Of
same with
course.
classical, you know.
I completely agree with you about the musicians, but there's some musicians who don't always get the idea of what you're trying to portray to them, but once they
Yeah,
see like the turntables or drums, whatever it might be, then they suddenly open up, which is
yeah.
so true. And you obviously mentioned Heritage Orchestra, I know really well, with George Buckley as well. Is that someone that you still talk to now or still keep in contact with?
Yeah, Jules Buckley. Yeah, I'm in touch with him. I need to chase. That's an email that I need to chase up. That's a good one. Now we saw each other. Well, oh God, I can't even remember. No, that was it. We saw it when he did this amazing thing at the Proms, the breaks, when they played all the
Yeah.
famous hip hop breaks and b-boy breaks with their orchestra, which was a brilliantly done. I mean, I was scared actually that it might not work out, but had so much attention to detail. They got the sound really good. Like the rhythm section just sounded awesome, and so did the orchestra. And yeah, so he's someone he really, you know, his background really is funk music. That's his love. But
Mm.
he's a brilliant conductor, and so he's someone, you know, will get the feel for a groove, or you know, you know, he'll understand styles beyond classical music, because it's so subtle the way that we interpret rhythm and accent rhythms to create grooves or play something completely straight or mechanical. Very, very subtle, and that is really down to the musicians trying to grasp what you do. It's interesting with most of my music has a lot of syncopation and often has these quite driving rhythms. And it was interesting, I found that in Russia, they're almost ahead of the beat sometimes. They've got a real on point style. And I recorded my concerto albums in Yekaterinburg in the south of Russia.
Mm.
It's 2 years ago now that recording happened, and they just been released last year. And yeah, I really liked how they played. I wouldn't say they didn't swing anything. No, it was all pretty locked on. But that actually really worked for the kind of groove I wanted. It was this tight driving, like on the money. You know, it's really like just totally solid, which I really like. And that's not the case with all musicians. But you hope they'll find their way of doing your groove. You know.
For definite. And I wish I could talk to you for longer, but I know you got a really busy evening, so I might have to stop the podcast right there. But Gabriel, I just
Okay.
want to say thank you so much again for taking the time to speak with me tonight. I've been a huge fan of yours
You're
for
really
many years.
welcome.
Just a chat to you, it's been a dream of mine. So thank
Yeah.
you.
No,
I
you're really
think you.
welcome. And we could just. I'm always like talking to people like yourselves, you know, who are in the orchestral and the beats world, you know. And there's a lot more we could talk about, I think. But
That's for
yeah,
sure.
been a real
I've got a
pleasure.
million and one questions to ask you, but now you've got a really busy evening, so I'm going to have to unfortunately cut it short. But thank
Fine.
you so much again for Gabriel. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank
Lovely to
you.
meet
You too.
you. Cheers.
And by the way, before we go, where can everyone find you as well online, just in case?
Oh yeah. So well, I've got my website, which is just gabrielprokofiev.com.
Hmm.
So, and that's got a news on the front page. Actually, there's latest news, and that tends to be kept pretty much up to date. So there'll be links on there to new tracks. There's the new single that's you can find that on Spotify, and my concerto as albums, they're on Apple Music, Spotify. You can also buy them from the label Signum Classics, and then non-classical as well. It's worth checking out the non-classical Bandcamp. There's a lot of really good music coming out there. We actually, one thing I'll add, non-classical has been really active during lockdown because we couldn't do our live events, and we've released a lot of music, including some really interesting lockdown compilations
I
called
saw.
I hope you are well in these strange times, volume 1, 2, and we're about to release volume 3 and volume 4, so look out for those. They're really interesting and showing what a lot of composers and music makers have been up to during lockdown.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a way to end the episode as well. So thank you so much again.
You're welcome.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
Georgio.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.